ladies and gentlemen, welcome today to today's webinar. And for joining in today, I know that a lot of people I've just seen on the chat where you guys are all signing in from today. Wow, from Asia, Middle East, Africa, Europe, and even the United States today, and South America as well. So we've got an amazing crowd. So again, I want to thank you for joining today's masterclass. I know there's so many webinars outside nowadays. I think we're getting webinar tired. So to see that there was over 750 registrations today for this webinar just wows me. So I feel very honored and very humbled, and to share with you my research and also the work that I've been working on during the whole COVID-19 situation. Before I get started, I just want to say that, you know, as an academic, as a professor, and also as a business person, you know, I think as an academic mainly, we teach people, right? I teach the classroom. I get to engage with the most amazing minds every single year, and normally I travel across the world to do this. Never ever wanting to do something like this online. Now I've come to learn and love the online and virtual platform, but I also think it's very much our, how should I say, it's our duty as an academic to share knowledge with the world. And so when this situation happened and I came back to Europe, I immediately jumped on the situation to start sharing knowledge, because on TV we're only hearing about medical experts providing insights on, you know, how COVID-19 is spreading and who's getting infected and who not. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty with the situation, and especially businesses who are in the economy who's so affected by this worldwide is not getting the right advice, at least not on TV and in the media. So I felt it my duty to do something about this. And some of the research that I'm working on today has been very much around the kind of phenomena of behavioral phenomena related to COVID-19. And that's what I'm going to share with you today in today's masterclass. And specifically, I'm going to focus on panic working. It's a new term that I've given to this phenomena, which is, I would even say it's an upcoming phenomena which is invisible to a lot of people. And as we go through today's presentation, you might become a little bit more aware of this phenomena and might even recognize that inside of you. And more importantly, panic working, if not dealt with effectively, and specifically, again, this is all relates to working from home, could lead to burnout, well-being issues, mental health issues. And so that's why I really feel that this webinar today will help to better inform you of some of the new upcoming phenomena that I'm currently investigating and finding in my work. So this is what the webinar will be about today. Again, what I love about these online webinars, when I'm doing this in class, after class it finishes, but 1 hour with 600 participants is not doable to address all your questions. I completely get that. But what I want to do is I like to continue the dialogue. So how I want to frame today's session is it's just an hour session with you and me, engaging on this topic, but there will be so many questions, and I don't want this discussion to stop. Panic working is here to stay for a while, and I want us to, I want to address your personal questions. And I want to do that in a way that's meaningful. And I don't want to be rushing through that today. So I put down below my socials, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I'll be putting much more of my academic work out there, having much more of a professional discussion. But I understand that a lot of people like to use Instagram. I'm also starting to use Instagram as well. And on Instagram, I'll have a more informal discussion with you. I'll also be sharing a lot of the content that I'm producing around this topic to better inform businesses, but also people, just generally anyone who's interested in learning more about COVID-19, how is it affecting mainly our behavior, our psyche, and also the media that I'm in, speaking on TV. I'll be sharing a lot of the clips through my social media, through the platform, so that we can have a further discussion. So a bit of an introduction from my side. So I'm a professor of organizational behavior and also of innovation at Holt International Business School. I work mainly on the Dubai campus, but also on the London campus and on the San Francisco campus. I was also doing a lot of work on the Shanghai campus, but because of the situation now with COVID-19, not doing much there, as you can imagine. Besides being a professor, well, in terms of my background, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. I specialize in cognitive psychology and also in talent management. I really care about performance and how to apply psychology in performance. So a lot of the industries that I work for are businesses, education institutions, sport teams, but also for the military and for defense. And so I apply psychological intervention there to help identify candidates, but also help them to develop their physical and both mental performance through assessments and psychological intervention. And in my classroom, in my teaching at Holt, I do a lot of this as well. It's really cool because it provides a 360 perspective to learning, not just sitting down reading the books, but giving you a full immersive experience that really tests you in all different ways. So I do apply a lot of that back into my teaching. I also work as a consultant, board advisor, mainly around the future of work, technology, and business transformation. I'm very interested in technology, and also at the same time, very interested in how we can make innovation work, because innovation is definitely the key driver for growth for now and also definitely into the future. COVID-19 is going to accelerate technology moving forward. And I think more and more businesses need to know how to make this change work, because very often this change is not stopped by our technical skills. It's much more stopped by our mental capacity, right? Our fear for change in that sense. So I do a lot around that. Some of the companies that I work for, as you can see in the list over there. And besides that, I also write a lot for Harvard Business Review, also for Forbes. And also, as I mentioned before, I'm a behavioral expert on TV as well. So yeah, that's a bit of about me. I also like to share something personal about myself as well. Yes, as you can see, I also panic work sometimes. We'll come to that in a second. Something personal about myself. I'm half English and I'm half Spanish. And I was born in the Netherlands. Wow, that's already a combination of itself, right? As you noticed from my name, I have a very Arabic name. My name is Ali Fennick. My full name is Musa Ali Fennick. If I had to tell you the story behind the name, so I'm not Arab, but there's a beautiful story behind this. It's a love story between my parents. So one day, if we have some time offline, I'll definitely give you a chat about that, because otherwise we'll be spending 3 hours here to talk about that. I love sushi, by the way. Give me a hands up if you like sushi as well. Digital hands up. Let me see if you also like sushi. I'm a big, big fan of sushi, by the way. So really, really like it. And one last thing about me is that I'm fairly fluent in Japanese. So before I actually ventured into my PhD, actually my bachelor's was in Japanese translation and interpretation. And I worked for a Japanese organization as the head of sales for about 9 years. So yeah, I'm pretty good in the Japanese language as well. And yes, finally in the picture on the right-hand side, I panic, right? Yes, we all panic. We all panic sometimes. And as we've gone through the past 2 months being in lockdown to some extent, I do find myself working a little bit more than I actually should be doing. I think also it has to do with me having a FOMO, so fear of missing out. When all these new topics come up and I get to speak about it, I want to write about it as well. And also make sure that I can provide these learnings back into the classroom, because I will be teaching as of next month. That also has to make sure, I also want to make sure that I have relevant content to share with you. So what are you going to learn today in today's masterclass? So by the way, before I move on, if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A function. You can ask your questions there. I will call out your name and your questions if you have any. And if you want to use the chat, I'll be following the chat as well. So you can put some answers and questions and comments over there as well, and we can have a dialogue around that. There will be a Q&A section at the end, but feel free to pose your questions, and Jad will assist me with that to let me know if there's any relevant questions we can address right now.
Yeah, actually, so, Professor Ali, someone is asking here, which is interesting. How did you learn Japanese? It's also interesting for me to know.
Well, I'll give you a brief answer on that one. I study Japanese, so that's how you learn Japanese. But I also lived in Japan, so like you would learn any language, I guess. So I guess that's my brief answer, but we can come back to a more detailed answer afterwards. But Jad, thanks for that one. So yeah, Jad's assisting me, as you can see here, with any of the questions that might be relevant. But I want to start this, this webinar, this masterclass, this virtual masterclass, with kind of this starting with understanding, how is COVID-19 affecting us, right? What is it doing to us? And I think this is one of the major reasons why psychologists are playing are at the forefront today, because it's really psychology that helps us in behavioral science to help understand why we're seeing these strange phenomena occurring because of COVID-19. And I'll address some of them in a second. So I want to start with that, and then I want to move on, and I want to talk about what is this new upcoming work phenomena that I call panic working. So what is it, and how does, what leads to panic working? And so you'll have a better understanding of the concept, the definition, but also more importantly, what are the things that lead to that? And most importantly, panic working is not really a good thing. You can already see it in the name, panic working. And if we keep on panic working, what will it do to us on the long run? And I think that's something we need to take into consideration. Hopefully this masterclass will help you take that away. And finally, how to prevent and overcome panic working. These are the practical strategies that I kind of want to end with in today's session to help you better understand what you can do about this. I mean, in general, the things that lead up to panic working, I think we're all doing, you'll learn today in this session. So, and regardless if you're panic working or not, or you might be, I think the practical solutions that I'm going to give to you are going to help you overall with your personal effectiveness. Okay, so that's what I'll be talking about as of today. Very briefly, some of the projects that I'm currently working on now around working from home. So I'm currently finalizing or working on a global working from home study that's going to be published. It's a global study that I'm working with multiple researchers on, behavioral researchers around the world, for the Nature magazine, and they have a specific section for human behavior. And so probably in the next couple of weeks, the first publication will be there. We're still collecting data at this stage. I'm also, as I mentioned before, I'm a spokesperson for working from home, but also on other behavioral phenomena related to COVID-19, and I speak a lot on the news. And so if you want more information on that, you can see that on my socials. At Holt, I'm also together with Victor Nielsen, one of my colleagues who works in the research department. We're developing an assessment for organizations to assess their working from home effectiveness. Now, I've been very vocal about this because I believe that, when we think about working from home, one of the first things that's happened is people being told to work from home, but not thinking about what are the policies that need to be put into place to make this work. And I have an assessment that I will be building and that we'll be sending out soon to companies, and to help them to address, are we doing it in the right way? I think, and it will be based on a lot of the things that I'll be talking about today as well. And finally, I'm also writing a book on how to work from home effectively and how to create working from home and make it the new norm in businesses, or already is becoming the new norm in business. But how can we do this in a very functional and effective manner? So any of these projects that you're interested in, or knowing more about, or you'd like to collaborate with me on any of these projects, please do reach out to me. My email is down below. Again, you can also use my socials for this. But if you're interested in any of these 4 specific projects, if you're working in this field, I would love to have a dialogue with you. So please do reach out to my email address down below. Okay, let's get started with today's session. So I want to talk a little bit about COVID-19. So what we've now understood about COVID-19 is that one thing we know for sure is that we don't know much. I think that's extremely clear. And initially that was the case, right? And that's when a lot of panic reactions started. Of course, you saw the panic buying happening. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But now moving forward, we still don't know much about it. Now, again, a lot of things are being put into question. Government agencies, even the World Health Organization is not giving really good guidelines. And I think a lot of these misinterpretations or, just not really knowing what the approach should be moving forward makes it really hard also for us citizens, businesses to know how to react effectively. And some of the things that we've also, because we don't know how to react, we react personally in our own ways. And this is where the psychology comes into play. Now, I want to share with you some of the behavioral phenomena that we've actually observed around the world because of this situation. Now, if you look at the top left-hand corner, why the 6 feet, right? Now, all of a sudden, I think this is a global phenomenon. The 6 feet or 2 meters, 1.5 meters distance that we now have to keep from each other is becoming kind of a new norm, a way to kind of prevent the spread of the virus. And because of this kind of 6 feet reality that we live in today, people are responding to this very differently. Some people accept it, other people are not okay with it, other people want to go against it and defy some of the health guidelines that are given to us. So it's very interesting to see that how we respond to new situations around this. But that's one big phenomenon that has really come out of this, out of COVID-19. Now, if bottom left down there, I think we've all seen all the media hype around this. Working from home, working from home, not working from home, panic buying, right? That has been a big thing, and everyone rushing out and going to buy toilet paper of all things. I mean, why do you need toilet paper to survive? You need food to survive. I mean, just, reality check. But people want and associate, toilet paper with survival in that sense. So this panic situation has put us into kind of like a survival mode in a sense. And because when we put into a survival mode, we start to act very irrational. Now, people have come to me and said, what's the difference between panic buying and hoard buying or bulk buying? Now, I think these are both kind of buying more stuff than you need to do, but bulk buying is a little bit more rational, right? You go there and you want to buy, I want to buy 3 packs of toilet paper. I want to buy 10 cans of food because maybe, just maybe, I might have to stay at home and be in lockdown. But panic buying is really going out and being irrational, buying 200 things of toilet paper. And in the United States, I actually saw that you can buy coffins of all things. I didn't know that you could buy a coffin in a supermarket. And I actually saw pictures of people going out and buying coffins of all things. It's blown my mind. But that has been also a phenomena that we've seen around the world. I did a video on panic buying, by the way. It went viral, interesting enough, because I provide some psychological insights around that, what happens there. Then on the right-hand side, you'll see working from home has become kind of the new norm. Normally working from home is a good thing. We like working from home, but now we're forced to work from home. And that's a very different situation. What that does to us psychologically, that's also one of the things I want to address today. And finally, virtual connection and online working has become the norm. But I have to mention here, and I want all of you to become very conscious of this, that it's a very small amount that actually can work from home effectively. So look at Europe, 50% of people that work from home cannot work from home, purely due to the nature of their business. Think of cafes, bars, restaurants, hotels, logistics, hospitals. These people have to be on the ground. They can't work from home. This percentage is about 65% in the US, and in Japan, it's around 70% of the people in Japan that cannot work from home. So remember one thing, working from home is not a given for everyone. Okay, so I think that distinction has to be made very clear. One thing that I kind of want to emphasize before moving on is, working from home where it's been possible has been done on a basis of, well, crisis has happened. So organizational managers and leaders have gone out and said, okay, let's work from home and we'll structure it and we'll set it up in that way. Now, what has happened here is mainly in the beginning and even till today, this whole kind of reorganization of the workplace has been on the basis of a technical design. So do you have the right hardware? Do you have the right software? Do you have the right internet bandwidth? And that's been it. Do you have the right IT support and maybe even security support, depending on how you have to communicate and how sensitive your information is? Yes, cool. That makes absolute sense. And I think initially what was happening here is that people had some issues around some of the technical aspects. But what I think a lot of organizations have forgotten to do, or just completely ignored, and not to blame, but because they just don't know that they exist, is that they didn't think about the psychological infrastructure of the organization that also had to be redesigned. Now, what is the psychological infrastructure? This is something that I call the social psychological environment of the organization. Now, when you're in the workplace, you are basically surrounded by people. There's all kind of social cues coming out, right? Making you understand, oh, wait a minute, you saw that I was doing something. I feel validated for the work that I do. I'm being acknowledged by the other people. So there's a lot of these invisible cues that are in the workplace that actually help us feel engaged, feel motivated, but also give us a sense of self-worth, right? When we don't get it, you don't feel that we're actually valuable. And I think this is really important to acknowledge, because this had not been taken into the design of either the HR policies or even into the working from home setups. And so what we're starting to see now more and more is people suffering, having stress, and to the point what I'm going to talk about today, working more than they should be working potentially also because of these invisible cues that people are not taking into consideration when designing working from home setups. So on that basis, and when we work from home, we're all working from home and doing our best to do so. And I like what Motion said, no stress at all. Other person says, I want to know how to balance my life, work-life balance. Because remember this, we have families, we have kids. Some of us don't even have, I feel very, I feel good. Well, I feel very happy because I have a separate space, as you can see here, to work from home. But there's a lot of people that don't have a separate space to work from home, and managing that requires your own abilities to do so. And we also have coping strategies. And that's what I want to talk about today, because we all have individual coping strategies to deal with an uncertain or fearful situation. However, what people are not aware of, and what's come out of my own research and work here, is that these different coping strategies that people are using when working from home are all leading to a similar state of mind or hyper productivity, which I call panic working. So that's what I want to share with you today. And I want to talk about what are these coping strategies and how do they lead to panic working. Now, any questions, Jad, before I move on? Is there any comments or questions?
Yeah, so actually we have a lot of questions basically. So we have Rita Tolf asking how to set boundaries and create my me time without feeling guilty, for example.
Ah, okay. Very good question. So Rita, thank you for that question. I'm going to address that in the second coping strategy, because guilt is something that will actually make us work more, because we feel guilty of wanting to put some kind of boundaries around ourselves, but then we think, well, what about the other people that are working so much? So Rita, I'm going to get to you. I'm going to get to your point when I talk about coping strategy number 2. But thank you for that. Please do keep your comments and questions coming, and I see I can address them as we move forward. Okay, so coping strategy number 1. Let me talk about that. I call this the ostrich effect. And what is the ostrich effect? As you can see on the picture here, the ostrich effect is kind of sticking your head in the sand and pretending like nothing is really happening. Now, why is this such an important thing to talk about? Denial. Is denial so important? Actually, I think the denial psychologically is one of the most underrated phenomena or aspects that people deal with, because it has such a huge effect on people. We kind of take it for granted because it doesn't hurt us, but denial has a huge impact on our behaviors, but also on our mindsets. Now, what do I mean with denial? Denial means like, oh, look, the virus is invisible. I can't see it. And with any kind of very uncertain situation, if you go through this model of change, denial is almost like the first phase, right? Denial, frustration, acceptance, and you move on into experimentation, and then you come into this new phase of change. But denial is the first part. And we've seen denial happen everywhere, not only with us. I've been asked on TV, so Ali, when are we going back to normal? And my first answer to that is, what do you mean? I think you are in denial asking me that question. There is no back to normal. I think we have to think about the new normal in this sense, because if we're thinking about 6 feet distance and retrofitting organizations to make this work for people, we are changing the way we act and work from now on and interact with other people. So denial is a really important aspect here, because when we're in denial, we kind of don't want to accept that this is a real thing. This is kind of a reality. And so what happens is, the more that we're in denial, the more that we just kind of pretend that it doesn't exist, the more we start to work, right? Because it's kind of our way. It's a coping strategy saying, this doesn't exist. So therefore, I'll just keep on working. And the more I work, the more it helps me to stay in denial. Now, the second coping strategy, and this is something I really identify with, I guess you guys maybe also as well, is what I call the busy bee syndrome. Remember when I spoke to you about this missing of the psychological infrastructure to help people feel safe and validated? Now, this is the kind of thing, when we work from home, we're not seeing what other people are doing. At the same time, we also know, will I still have a job? All of these companies now moving along in these next couple of weeks, considering how to, furlough employees or fire employees. So we want to show up. We want to show up and be productive. And we might have this pressure to show up more than we normally do when they're in the office, because we're missing a lot of these cues that I mentioned about. So think about being acknowledged, right? We want to be acknowledged. The moment that we're sitting at home, there's no acknowledgement, or not as much as we would probably get back into the workplace. There's also this thing of recognition. You want to be recognized for what you do, right? And that's really important. Then we also have being validated and getting feedback. Now, these are things that don't always happen very directly. They can also be communicated non-verbally. Because remember one thing, 93% of our communication is nonverbal. And so when we're in the organization, we're picking up cues and signs from other people around us to kind of, taste the air or smell the air or understand what's happening from a high context perspective. In Japan, for example, this is a very common thing. They use a lot of high context communication to really understand what's going on. They don't use a lot of words. They pick up on the cues. Now, when we're working from home, this environment is not there anymore. So when this is not there, we actually want to now get more involved. We want to show up more. We participate in all these webinars. We start texting people. We want to organize get-togethers. We want to show other people that we're there. And this is what I call the busy bee syndrome. Now, there's a big problem with the busy bee syndrome. It's contagious. Not a lot of people don't think about that. And when you're being a busy bee, then you see your colleagues who you can't see only virtually being very busy, sending emails, putting stuff out the whole time, and also continuously trying to grab attention. Then all of a sudden you think, wait a minute, if that person's working so hard, maybe I should be working so hard. Maybe that person, and then it becomes very contagious. So that's something that's really dangerous. And now look at it from the manager's perspective. If you're a manager and you're watching, you're saying, wow, this is great, guys. Productivity is off the roof. And everyone's thinking, yes, virtual work, working from home. We should have done this a long time ago. Productivity has never been as high as ever before. And people are rationalizing, oh, it has to be our work policies. Our working from home policies, they're so good. But not realizing that busyness is not productivity. And when managers make this mistake, they don't take this into consideration. And when this kind of hyper productivity because of the busy bee syndrome goes unchecked, it can have tremendous negative effects to your psychology, but also to your mental health and well-being, and even physical well-being for that matter of fact. So this is where I think Rita's question came in. How can I set boundaries with not feeling guilty? And this is exactly it, because we don't feel acknowledged, we don't feel validated, we feel bad. We start to question our self-worth. Am I worth it? Am I still going to have a job? Right? So we want to act out more. So we don't want to put those boundaries in place because we might feel guilt around it, or maybe because we see other people working so hard, we might feel guilty around that as well. Then the other coping strategy is working to survive. Now, this is a very important one to mention. COVID-19 is not making us fearful of our health, but also of our livelihood, right? Are we still going to have a job? I have to go to the workplace. Remember that a lot of people can't work from home, so they have to go to the factories and work, and they're also scared of their survival. So in this sense, working to survive is another coping strategy that has to be dealt with. But also when we talked about the panic buying, remember when the survival mode switches in and we become very irrational? It's natural for us. Look, there's no saber-toothed tiger jumping on us and we having to rush away, right? That fight or flight situation. But we naturally want to fight to survive. And therefore that fight to survive also means work to survive. I've heard stories from different people saying, I'm in bed with my laptop, literally falling asleep, just keep on working the whole time. I don't stop. And when I asked them I asked them to reflect, why is this happening to you? It's just like, I'm really fearful. If you really ask me what's going on, I'm scared for my family. I'm scared for my health. I'm scared for my livelihood. How are we going to come out of this? And so working to survive is a major coping strategy that will lead people to work more than they have to. Because remember, fight or flight, it switches your mindset into a hyperdrive moment. And the final coping strategy that I want to share with you is called regaining control, working to regain control. Now, again, similarly to the panic buying scenario, right? Because why were people going out and panic buying? It was not only because they were being completely irrational in terms of, oh, we need to have all of this to survive, but also as a way to exert their self-control over their environment. Remember this. COVID-19 has locked us in our homes. We are self-isolated. We have to keep physical distance from each other. In some situations, people are put under curfew and even fined for going outside. So we're losing this feeling of control over our environment. So what we naturally want to do is we want to exert our self-control over the environment that we're operating in. And a way to do that is panic buying, but also a way to do that is panic working. And if we do that in a way that is meaningful for us, it will help us to feel safe, because the moment that we are able to regain control is the moment that it can help us to feel safe. And if we do that in a way that's meaningful for us, which is a good thing. But the problem with this is that maybe similar to the panic buying situation, we might go and work too much. We might overwork in this situation. And so this strategy as well leads to a hyper productivity mindset that I already mentioned before that I call panic working. Now, I want to do a quick test with you guys. I've got a poll set up. Jad's going to set it up for you right now. And I want to ask you one specific question. Now that you know what panic working is and what causes panic working, I want to ask you guys if you identify any of these 4 coping strategies. So, Jad, are you there?
Yep, I am.
Can you launch the poll, please?
Yeah, let's do it.
So the question is, are you using or have you used any of the following coping strategies that I just discussed with you while working from home? Okay, so are you using or have you used any of the following coping strategies while working from home? So the ostrich effect, the busy bee syndrome, working to survive, working to regain control, or none at all. Maybe some of you might also say none at all. So please post your votes. And then let's see what you guys came up with. And then we can kind of look at the data together and we can kind of have a discussion around that. And in the meantime, I'm also going to look who's posed any questions here. Nicholas says, how working from home can be a new norm in business. I can't see that this method is productive. Now, Nicholas, this is interesting. I think what we're seeing so far is that there are, productivity gains for those people who can work from home. And so what we've seen there in this situation is that, we don't have to commute as much anymore. We're closer to family members. We're able to learn how to manage our time more effectively. We can get in and out of meetings much more faster. We find also, so far, the data shows that when you actually have a virtual seminar or a virtual meeting, you're much more, you're much more productive in the sense of you stick to an agenda, you cut out all the stuff that's not, very important for the discussion, and you know that you have a certain timeline that you have to deliver that in. So in that sense, I think what's happened is that a lot of us have come to acknowledge a lot of the productivity benefits. At the same time, I think one of the biggest issue has been managers, why working from home has not really been before COVID-19 such a big thing. Just to give you a statistic or a data point, 5% of the United States, people who are working in the United States, were working from home regularly. 5%, that was it, right? So it just shows you that not everyone was doing so. But I think another issue because of that was the reason behind that was the fact that managers, had this kind of mindset of, if I don't see you, I don't believe you, right? I don't trust you. And so therefore, a lot of managers were very kind of haphazard about, accepting working from home policies, or maybe they did and they pulled it back eventually. But I think COVID-19 has changed that dramatically. I think the whole world is now working from home, again, for those who can. And I think more and more companies will start to think of this. Look at Google. It's not Google, Twitter, for example. Twitter just recently announced that they're going to allow working from home forever. They've just set a new industry standard in the changing nature of work. So we have companies that are now forever to never. That's kind of the continuum, I like to call it, forever to never. And which companies fall in those two lines, or those two brackets. So I would actually say I do see it becoming a new norm, and I do see it becoming more productive. But to your point, there are some things, some industries and some work where it isn't. So I like the point, but I would like to provide a perspective to that. Okay. So thank you for that one. So that one answers. So maybe we can go to the poll. Can you share the results? Yeah.
I'm going to end the polling. Share the results.
Okay. Aha. As I expected, the busy bee syndrome at number 1, 41% of us out of the answers that came through have said that yes, I have or have been busy being in that sense, and especially now that a lot of us are now almost in over 60 days in lockdown. That a lot of us are kind of still very fearful of what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen moving forward, how to show up. And I think that this specific coping strategy will be very recognizable moving forward. Some people, 4%. Again, it's a very small percentage as of today, because I think a lot of us have moved out of that denial stage, right? Some of us are still in it, but a very small percentage, and the poll results reflect that. So in this poll, 4% say that they have or have or are or have in the past been in the ostrich effect or used that kind of coping strategy to deal with the current situation. Then we have 16% working to survive, very recognizable. I think the people who are joining in today are, people that can work from home. Most of you are. And so, working to survive is something more related to, am I being fired or not? But let's also stand still for a second. People who cannot work from home, who are working in factories, low cost labor, those people have to go to work. For them, it's the choice. It's a rational choice. What do I do? Go to work and survive, or stay home and survive and keep my family safe? This is not really a trade-off. I mean, it's unfortunate, but people have to make that decision sometimes. And if we looked and surveyed people that are in those conditions who can't work from home, we would see that working to survive probably would be much more higher than what we're actually seeing in these surveys. So taking the surveys and putting into context is really important. And then on second place, 26% of the people that responded, working to regain control. I think a lot of us are doing this, maybe unconsciously, but it makes sense, right? Because we're being put into, we're losing our sense of control, can't go out, keeping distance. And yesterday I just spoke on the news about the behavioral effects of using tracking devices. So I don't know if you've seen this around the world, COVID-19 tracking devices to track you and to see, have you been in contact with someone who's had COVID-19? And, I can imagine that a lot of people would feel very uncomfortable with this, right? After being, your sphere of mobility, personal freedom has already been compromised. Now having a tracking device, and some countries actually are forcing you to use this tracking device. Otherwise, they'll put bans on you. I mean, it's something that we only hear in movies, and we have these scary images when we think about this. So working to regain control, I believe, is also very much a very strong aspect here. And it's also reflected back in the data. And 14% of you say none at all, right? And a lot of people say, no, I'm completely fine with this. It's probably pretty okay for me. I'm not worried about this, but none at all. And again, it's a minority in this. Well, not the minority, but still it's a very small portion of people. And I think as we start to get more used to working from home, and we develop more personal strategies. And at the end of today's presentation, the personal strategies I'm going to share with you are going to help you to be much more effective working from home. And hopefully none at all will be the future where we're going to go to. So yes, thank you for sharing those results, Jad. Thank you so much. That was great. So quickly, let's just move on now to the coping strategies, and then I'm going to end it up for our conclusion. And I want to have more time on the Q&A, honestly speaking, because I would like to hear from you. So what are the things that we can do in this sense? So one of the things we can do is, first of all, physical boundaries is really important. So that's one of the recommendations that I have. What do I mean with physical boundaries? Now, when we go to work, we physically go to work, right? We put on our work identity, we put on our work clothes, our tie, our dresses, whatever we're wearing to go to work, and we physically move away. Now, this physical movement is really important psychologically because we want to switch identities. Remember, we have different identities, right? With the mom, with the dad, the manager, the supervisor, the office worker, whatever identity that we have, the environmentalist. And when we physically switch to a new environment, it's a way for us to engage and enact that identity. When we put on that identity, we have behaviors that are related to that identity. Now, remember, when you're working from home and you don't have a physical boundary that you can create, it becomes really hard to respond within that identity that you have. Am I now being the dad responding, or I'm now being the best friend responding, or am I being the manager or the supervisor or the employee responding to this, the behavior? What do I need to give? So physical boundaries in that sense helps you to create that separation between work and the home life. And another reason why that's so important is because if you are having issues in your work environment, or there's feelings of anxiety and stress that a lot of us are actually having when working from home because of the uncertainty that we're in, we don't want to bring that back into the home environment, right? Because what we already know from home remote work research is that kind of can affect our moods in our personal space. And more importantly, it can affect our relationships. And that's something we don't want, right? Because when we're at home, we want to be together, and we don't want to have our work affect our personal circumstances. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is mental boundaries. So I'm very, very conscious of the fact that a lot of people just don't have a physical space. I feel very privileged to have this space, but a lot of people don't have this space. So look in Hong Kong, for example, or Japan, Tokyo, where the average, the average size of a house is about 45 square meters. So you can't expect anyone to have a separate space to work in. So what's really important is you can also kind of separate your work and private life by creating mental boundaries. Now, what do I mean with mental boundaries? Mental boundaries are the traditions, the rituals, the routines, our habits that we use on a day-to-day basis to get us through the day. So for example, getting up in the morning at a specific time, brushing our teeth, having a shower, getting dressed, going to work, having breaks, having lunch, and ending the day at about 6, 7 o'clock, right? That's kind of a normal routine, whatever your habit is. And when we're working from home, I think more than ever before, having these habits is so essential because it helps us to structure our mind and to create better boundaries. So for some things that I do, I get dressed as a habit. I really put on my work clothes. I come into my room, but I really put on my work clothes because I want to be the spokesperson. I want to be the professor. I want to be the researcher. And I want to get into that mindset. So actually dressing up really makes me feel more productive and gets me into that work identity. But also at 6 o'clock, I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I have a hard stop. I stop. I don't work anymore. Yeah, I do panic work a little bit sometimes, but I really stop. I make time for the people around me. I make time for sports. I do other things, but I create that mental separation in my mind that is so important for me to help me separate work from my private life. And I'm finding over time that I also had to improve that skill, but it's making me so much more productive. So that's something that I definitely recommend. And the final thing that I recommend is staying socially connected. Now, with lockdowns, I know a lot of you is still in lockdown. Other places, people are keeping their distance still, not really meeting up with other people, just to prevent the spread of the virus, but still using technology, phones, WhatsApp, video conferencing to stay connected. I'm hearing so many examples, the water cooler kind of chit chat, but doing it virtually online, having coffee moments with people online. It's really funny. I reached out to someone recently and I said, yes, it would be great to see each other again. And the person lives in China. Yeah, we'd love to see you. I can't wait till COVID-19 is over and we can connect again. I'm like, what are you talking about? We can connect right now. Let's get on a Zoom call and have coffee together. And it just kind of, that connection in itself was great because it makes me feel that I have a reality check. I know what's going on around the world. So stay connected with people is so important. It helps us to understand who we are. It helps us to understand what's going on. And it helps us to also feel safe, right? We're human by nature. We want to stay connected. And I think this is one of my biggest recommendations. So use the technology to your benefit, because remember, technology is a means to an end. Okay, technology is a means to an end. So that's it, guys. This is the conclusion. I'm gonna go directly to your questions. I think we've got enough time for the question time as well. So here we go. The conclusion from my side is panic working is an upcoming phenomena due to working from home for long periods of time under uncertain conditions, because that's the situation we're in today. But as one of the people said in the chat function, I'd like to also know how to prevent panic working beyond COVID-19. And that is why I've given this definition, because this doesn't only relate to working, let's say working from home in COVID-19. The second thing is, we have different coping strategies, but these different coping strategies all lead to a hyper productivity state of mind, which I call panic working. So that's something to be recognized. And finally, the final 2 points is managers will easily mistake busyness for productivity. Now that's something we have to watch out for, because if you think people are now being productive and you're hailing working from home, also be mindful of the fact that this productivity can also be related to panic working. And you as a manager, more than ever before, have to now connect more from the inside with your employees, have more kind of nice chats, not just work chats, and see how people are going. Because remember, in this, when people are fearful, people are not going to be telling you that they're panic working. They're not going to tell you that they're working to survive, right? But be mindful of this phenomena and maybe, enact or engage or initiate dialogues that you can help to maybe address this in a very sensitive manner that will help people to open up, and shows you that you have this connection with your employee. I think really managers' roles also don't only have to be that of the tasks, but have to be more on the emotional side of things when working from home, because we have to find ways to connect with each other when we're working in a virtual environment. And the last one is develop new habits to help you improve your personal effectiveness, set boundaries, connect. And I think it's going to benefit all of us. Even beyond COVID-19, we're going to become so much more better at how to manage ourselves. But for now, these are some of the strategies. This is the phenomena that I wanted to share with you and make you more aware of, because a lot of people don't know about this. And I want to open it up for questions, Q&A, comments, etc. And I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for your attention. It's been absolutely great. And I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say.
Professor Ali, just one thing before we go into the Q&A.
Yeah.
Actually, I would like to just stop up on something that you said. Now, during the working from home, we tend to use a lot the word social distancing. Remember,
Yes.
once you posted a post on Instagram that I found really interesting that maybe like you could share, and you said, let's stop using the term social distancing and start using the term physical distancing.
Right. Absolutely. So I have a big issue. Thank you for pointing that out, Jad. I have a really big issue with the term that we're using, social distancing. Initially, when we were telling people to socially be distant from each other, in the first couple of weeks, people were like, "What do you mean socially distance? We're inherently human, right? We want to connect." And especially in the uncertainty that we live in today, when we don't know what to do, we tend to follow other people, especially other people like us. So in that sense, social distancing is kind of telling us not to be human. And the problem that I have with social distancing is when people, first thought about social distancing, it was you have to work from home and your kids are not allowed to go to school. Now, what do you do when you don't go to work and your kids are at home? It's playtime, right? You start to connect and you want to connect. So that was having an adverse effect in the beginning. But second of all, I think the whole terminology, the definition of social distancing is not a good thing because we need to be socially connected. But how can you be socially connected while being physically distant? And I think the term that I wanted to have people use much more was physical distancing. Because in our minds, remember when we're in this survival mode, we can't always think as rational. So what does social distancing mean? Physical distancing is so much better to understand because it shows, okay, I need to be physically distant from you. You can be in my house, but I still need to be 2 meters away from you. I need to keep that proximity distance, but I don't have to be socially distant from you. And I think this is where it can be misinterpreted. And I think this is a very dangerous thing to do because people really don't understand what it means. Now, one of the examples that we actually saw happening, people were actually defying the physical distancing measures and they were getting together. And a lot of people, that question I was asked on the news as well, Ali, don't you think that people are being selfish? Well, I said, yeah, in a certain sense, people were being selfish. However, you cannot blame them because when people don't know what to do, remember, you tend to follow other people similar like you. So if other friends are getting together, remember that getting together can help you to feel safe as well. So that's the issue that I have with the term social distancing. Still today, I don't like to use that word. And hopefully we can start using physical distancing as a term moving forward. Jad, thank you for that one. How are we doing time-wise? I'm just going to go look at the questions. Let me see over here. Maya Matter asks, some people are panic working to prove to their bosses that they are being useful and to avoid being redundant. Scared of losing their jobs, they panic work at odds. What advice can you give to those people? Well, Maya, absolutely. This relates to the coping strategy that I mentioned before, right? The busy bee syndrome. You want to show, you feel this pressure to be productive and to show up because you want people to see you. You don't want to lose your job. So it's also a kind of combination of working to survive as well. So this is inherently a big issue. And I want to give a really great example. Look, in the UAE, for example, I guess Maya, that's where she's based. If you don't have a job, you basically don't have a right to stay in the country. So panic working can be a huge thing there. But also look at the United States, right? In the United States, when you lose your job, you lose your right to health insurance. So your health insurance, not your visa status, is linked to your linked to your job. So it's basically also working to survive because if you don't have a job, how can you take care of yourself? So what to say here in this situation? It's really hard to say. I mean, I guess the answer that I would give to this depends on the country that you're in, but I think it's a natural response. It's a coping strategy that we have. But I think the advice that I can give in general to the different responses and the different impacts that the busy bee syndrome has, but also losing our jobs has, is try to set some boundaries for yourself. Set boundaries in a sense of knowing what you're doing and finding maybe some effective ways of how to respond to this. So once your irrationality, because remember a lot of the behaviors are very irrational in this state if we're panicking. But once we can kind of take control of that the panic reaction and think more logically, then we can think more critically of how can we maybe be more strategic about, being in contact with the organization, with our bosses, so that we can show, that we can probably show ourselves up a little bit more in a more effective manner. But there's no direct answer to that, Maya. I think that's a really tough question, really tough one to deal with, and I think a lot of us are dealing with that. So that was Maya's question. Jad, if you see any questions, please answer. Please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just move through the list that I have here.
Sure, sure. We have a couple of questions actually. How do we
Yes.
keep small businesses in undeserved communities effectively transition to working remotely without losing their core operational capabilities?
So how do we help small businesses in underserved communities where there might be tech and internet limitations effectively yes. Well, I think this is a huge issue, right? I mean, there's a lot of countries around the world. Let me just show the answer as well. There's a lot of countries around the world where, again, what I mentioned before, the reality is that a lot of us can't work from home. Nature of the jobs, but also maybe also due to the fact that they just don't have internet connections. Africa, South America, other countries in Asia. India is a great example of that as well. So transitioning to working from home is already going to be difficult if the nature of your work that you're doing doesn't facilitate that. And also if you don't have, if you don't have your abilities to get online and work remotely. So I think inherently that is a major hindrance why we're not seeing that happen. To give something of a more positive perspective here, I think of those businesses, of the people, small and medium enterprises that can't work from home today, I think what's going to happen is we're going to see this kind of re-strategization, right? We're going to see companies rethinking their business model. We're already seeing that happen right now. But once we get out of this situation and we can rethink this, digitization and technology will start to play a fundamental core, or will be so fundamental to the redesign of these new business models. So a lot of people like cafes, if you can't go out, how can you still serve people? So creativity and imagination, Twanello, I think the question came from, is going to be really important in this case to think about what are our limitations, what can we do, and at the same time, how can we transition into a more digital aspect, or what can we do for the community, right? This is where I kind of think that community building or investing, either government, sometimes I know there's no resources there, but think of how can you start making more use of the community to build up capabilities and skills around this. I know this is not a very direct question. The answer is also, it's a fairly broad answer, but I want us to think more about how can we be more creative and imaginative. But Tonello, I'd like to have a further chat with you on that. Maybe we can do that also through one of the socials as well. Let me see. Then we have Orhan Sozen, who asks, although I find working from home even more effective, I believe that we're using our relations created while we've been working next to each other. How shall we establish those relations in the future? I'm not quite sure if I understand that question, but I'm thinking that you want to be socially connected. I'm guessing that Orhan is the question. I'm not sure, but yes. So staying socially connected is really important. As I already mentioned, some of the advice that I give is you need to use the technology nowadays to really maintain those relationships, not just only in the private space, but also very much in the business space. Because remember, we're all human by core, by nature. And I also think one big thing that we're facing right now is that this box, right, this computer that we're working with today, the issue around this box is that it's very low context. This means that we have to use a lot of words to communicate, but the kind of the cues that we were talking about before, or the environmental cues, the emotional cues that we would need to use to communicate with, we're missing out on that. Remember, 93% of our communication is nonverbal. But I think as the technology will further evolve, we might have augmented reality and more virtual reality, or maybe some of the tools that we might have moving forward in the virtual space will be much more advanced, that we can start picking up on these cues. But until then, I think we have to do with what we have, with the limitations that we have today. But future technology evolvement should focus much more on delivering high context, almost close to realistic interaction in a virtual space. So I'm not sure if I answered that question, Orhan, for you effectively, but that would be my answer. Bash asks here, how do we define our working hours? Great question. And I'm going to give you a good answer to this, because this addresses not only the employee, but it also addresses the manager. Now, how do we define our working hours? I think one thing that has happened with working from home is that, remember, we have to balance our private life with our work life. Now, there will be certain hours that we have to be online, because everyone works between a certain time. But I think autonomy is now becoming a really important discussion point, because remember, part of regaining control is also being having the abilities to make your own decisions, but having your own ability to decide when you work. And it's not the amount of hours that you spend, and this is where the busyness becomes an issue. It's not the amount of hours that you spend working, but it's the inputs versus outputs. And I think what managers need to do here is they don't have to be micromanaging. Please, please do not micromanage. I've seen so many situations, I've heard of so many scenarios because the managers can't see their employees. They're now micromanaging. Can you imagine that stress on top of all the other stress that you're experiencing now at this stage? It's not done. So please don't micromanage. I think that's a learning curve that the managers have to go to. But how do you go into performance management? How do you evaluate if people are delivering on time? I think performance based on output is your key metrics. So what is the output being delivered? But don't focus so much on how people are doing this. Allow people to maintain their own working hours, how they want to do it. I mean, some people love to work in the mornings, they're more productive. Some people also have to take care of their kids, and then they come back in the afternoon, and they might also want to work at the nighttime. So unless we're going into bug down into details, focus more on the output of things, and don't focus so much on how things are being done. So how to define working hours? There is this kind of like, certain hours that you might want to work within the organization time, but also there's other hours that you want to work for yourself. And I hope that employers and employees, as developing the psychological environment, thinking about that, or the infrastructure, that managers and employees can have this dialogue to see how can they make their working from home more effective, and how can they build more autonomy into this. So I think that would be my answer to that. Do you see any other questions you want to pull up, or maybe I can do some more here? I'll do one more here. I see here, working from home appears to be more stressful and working longer hours. How can this be managed? I think the recommendations I've given so far has been more along the lines of how to set up boundaries for yourself. I think this is critical, physical and mental boundaries. So having more boundaries in your life will help you to be more in control, help you feel more in control, but also help you to distinguish, your work from your private life. And also this will help you to, once you feel more in control, you feel less stressed. And when you feel less stressed, you'll be more productive. But look, I leave it up to you as well. I mean, you know yourself better than anyone else. But if you find yourself that you're really working too many hours, and it's not only affecting your health, but it's also affecting the people around you, watch out, because we need the people around us so much, right, that we don't want to affect that. So if that becomes your awareness point, that may be a moment that we have to start rethinking how to put more boundaries into our lives. I think that's a very important thing. Amr Al-Breaki says, would it be a good idea to keep a routine while working from home, or try to experiment with doing everything in different times? Great question. I think, remember when we talked about everyone has their individual differences? This is exactly the same situation when we're talking about or coping strategies. How do you work from home, right? I'll give you a personal example. I'm not very much a morning person. I like to just do redundant work in the morning time, like emails and stuff like that. Even check my Instagram and my LinkedIn, because the blue light on my phone, by the way, helps me to stay awake. Gets me up in the morning time. So I do a lot of the redundant stuff in the morning time. And then towards 11, 12 o'clock, I start getting more involved in meetings because I know that's my most productive time. And so I kind of switch between these different modes. I find switching very good, but other people don't. So I think the answer to your question here is find a routine that works for you effectively, what works for you, and try and figure out how you can make that more effective over time. So basically, experiment. I like the word that you use, experiment, because remember when we talked about going this through this phase of change, the denial, frustration, acceptance. After acceptance comes experimentation. And when we start to experiment, we start to find out what really works for us, right? I think that's a critical thing to take into consideration. So yes, please do experiment and find what works for you. There's not one size that fits all. Jad, how are we doing time-wise?
So we're doing good, actually. We're way ahead of time, I guess.
Good. So that's what I wanted to do. I really wanted to focus on the questions here that people were giving. Let me see, what else do we have here? This one is from Leah Raffin. A lot of different countries are starting to stop quarantine and starting to go back to normal. Ooh, between brackets. Okay, you said between brackets. That's good. Do you believe that panic working will have an effect on the way we work when we go back to the office and when we don't consider ourselves anymore in the crisis? Great question. Relates also to some of the questions that we saw before. Yes, I do. I think that panic working will still be there, regardless of there being a COVID situation or not. Again, feeling uncertain when we work from home, not missing out on the psychological infrastructure. I think this is fundamental. And if managers don't build in, or leaders build in the psychological infrastructure into working from home setups, it becomes very difficult to get that acknowledgement, feel validated, getting feedback on a regular basis. I think that's something very important that will still continue that panic working to happen. And so, yes, I still think it will continue, but I think it's being highlighted and it's being emphasized now because of also the other uncertainties, such as being under this under the uncertainty of a pandemic in that sense. So I do think it will continue, but it has been exuberated because of the pandemic situation that we are in today.